I thought DJ Durkin and John Cohen were phenomenal yesterday.
In the world full of podcasts, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of hot takes, an Auburn sports homer, master of the boog, and message board legend. Get your buttons buttoned and your hats flattened because the Top Button Podcast is about to kick off. And you don't want to miss your courtside seat. Now, here's your host, Charlie Five.
Yes, sir. We're back. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Rush, a.k.a. Charlie Five, and we are ready to get after it. When there's not a lot of positives you can point to, you got to lean on anything that you get. And I thought yesterday, DJ Durkin and John Cohen were phenomenal. I thought they really were. They represented Auburn really well, answered some really tough questions, and I picked out some points that I thought I want to dive a little bit deeper into. Just thought they did a really good job. We're going to talk about those here in just a second. I got a couple for each. But before we do that, let's give a quick shout out to Rhoback.com. I got my Rhoback hoodie on right now. Use coupon code BARN20 to take 20% off your order. They have Auburn licensed apparel, which I'm wearing currently. And then they have everything else that you can imagine. Really cool designed polos. They have great other colored hoodies. Pullovers, all that good stuff. You want to get you some good layering pieces as the temperature starts to drop, Rhoback's the place for you. So save big, show them some love. It's Rhoback.com. I think I want to start with DJ Durkin, obviously, because he's your head coach now for the next 3 games. And I think the one thing that I really liked about him is that coaches can say a lot of things that are just coach speak, and it's boring, and you hear all that stuff all the time. And Hugh Freeze definitely did not give you coach speak. Sometimes he'd said a little bit too much. But one thing I liked about DJ Durkin that you can feel is he's laser focused on these next 3 games. He was asked about next year. He was asked about his name in the coaching search. I don't think it would have been bad to say, right there in front of the guy that you're going to interview with, I love this place. I love this job. But he said, I'm laser focused. Essentially he's laser focused on these next 3 games. And you could feel that. You could feel that through a lot of his answers. You could feel that. You could feel the intensity from this guy just being in the same room with him. But one thing that I really liked that he said, I got 2 things in particular, but one thing I really liked that he said was he was asked about changes that he would make. You're the head coach now. Or is there going to be much staff upheaval? Is there going to be philosophy changes? Is there going to be this? Is there going to be that? And his response was fantastic. He said, look, sometimes it's not about what you're doing. It's about how you're doing it. Sometimes it's not what you're doing. In other words, it's not necessarily that it's this philosophy or that it's the process, the offense that they're utilizing. Sometimes it's not necessarily that. It's how you go about doing it. Whether that be in practice, preparation. That is what I feel like has been one of the pain points that everyone talks about when it comes to the offense. It's not so much about what we're doing. It's not so much about that we don't think that it's an outdated system, or it's not so much that there's this huge philosophy, this huge flaw in what you want to do. It's just all the steps that lead up to the game, or all the steps in practice to get you prepared to go execute that on Saturday that maybe could be fixed. The thing is, it looks like on Saturdays, it typically looks like a team that's just unprepared. Yeah, there's guys open at times. There's plays to be made. There's gaps to be hit. There's lanes created that are missed. there's silly penalties. There's play calls getting in mega late. There's all these things that's not necessarily just the offense, what you're doing. It's how you're executing. It's how everything happens that leads up to that play call that goes in on 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 9 or 1st and 10. It's everything that you do that leads up to that moment. And I think acknowledging that was very, very refreshing because it confirms a lot of concerns, maybe. Is that the right? Maybe that's the right word. Concerns that that onlookers have when they view like an Auburn practice on the offensive side. I mean, it's just reality. You look at the defense, there's literally, they break these practices up into periods, okay? And there's a timer. So like period 1, maybe 10 minutes. Period 2, maybe 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes. Period 3, maybe insert whatever time you want. On the defensive side, there is something happening until the horn sounds every single period. They are maximizing every single period in every single position group. Every time they go into a team portion, it is maximized to the T. And you look over in the offense, and it's like we got a 6-minute period. If we get done what we want to do in 5 minutes, there seems to be a lot of like standing around and sort of waiting on the horn to go off. The whole stretching thing separately. I mean, there's so many little bitty things that you can point to that's like, man, that's exactly what DJ's talking about. It's not so much about what we're doing, it's how we're going about doing it. And that's the small things that he's going to change, that he wants to change. And believe it or not, I mean, I really do think those small things can go a long way and can make a big difference. So that was the first thing that was very refreshing to hear. And then he confirmed Derek Nix was the play caller, but he didn't just confirm it. The way he said it was very telling, in my opinion. And I'm gonna eat some crow on this. He said specifically something to the tune of Derek Nix is the only play caller, and the way he said it was like, we're not doing this triple-headed thing anymore. Derek Nix is the play caller. He's the only one calling plays on Saturday, and he's calling all the plays. I paraphrased it, but that's kind of what he said and how he said it. In other words, it's like the setup before is not happening again. We're having one guy talking to nobody else. Now, granted, there's probably going to be communication still. I still don't think collaborative play calling is like way out of bounds, but maybe this thing was a little bit more three-headed monster than we thought. And if that's the case, maybe that led to some of the disjointment or some of the lack of continuity, it felt like, where it's like we just didn't really know what the plan was. But yeah, he's like, hey, look, we got one guy. One guy, he's going to call every single play. There's only one person we can look at. He's going to call every single play, and he's going to be the only one calling plays. So for those that were concerned about saying there was going to be a first down play caller, a third down play caller, again, I don't know if it's legit as legitimate as Derek Nix says, hey, we're going to run 32 counter on first down. And then Hugh Freeze says, okay, let's run 32 counter. And then Hugh says, I got the next one. And then he says, okay, it's third down. What are we running, Kent? And then Kent says, okay, we're going to run whatever. We're going to run XYZ, Spider Z, Y banana. Okay, we're running Spider Z, Y banana. I don't know that it was necessarily like that, but regardless, they're eliminating all the voices. It's going to be one person. Maybe that makes a huge difference. You know, instead of everybody looking back at the line and changing and audibling and people not knowing where to line up and whatnot. when you got one voice, maybe that's all you need. So I was refreshed to see that. I think he just did a really good job in a very tough spot. I think he represented himself well. I think he represented Auburn well. And I know that they're going to go through a coaching search. I know there's going to be a ton of candidates that are very, very qualified. He just, in that very short glimpse that we saw him, I think everybody would be proud if that was your coach representing you from a press conference. You'd be refreshed to hear him behind the podium and not being sort of like cringe waiting for a foot to be inserted in a mouth. So good job, DJ Durkin. I thought John Cohen was a pro. Holy cow. He had 3 big spots, 3 big moments. We'll talk about that in just a second. We'll be back right after this. John Cohen seems to get this rep among some people of the boogeyman. I've talked about the Auburn boogeyman. There's always somebody that's holding Auburn back. And John Cohen kind of gets the boogeyman rep sometimes. Like the way people acted about the timing of the firing was silly. Like acting like we should fire John Cohen now too, because he didn't fire him in enough time that I wanted. I wanted it sooner. So he doesn't know what he's doing. So he should be fired too. Silly, complete joke. The way that guy handled himself yesterday was a complete pro. Now, he's obviously had training and he's obviously had experience. He walked up. He said, "I don't have a statement. I'm going to open it up to questions. Like, let's get in. Let's roll our sleeves up and let's get after it." So he was ready to go. He was ready to take questions right away. There was no stalling, no nothing. He got up there and he took probably 10 or 12 questions. It was just bam, bam, bam. One question he was asked, I think a lot of athletic directors lean on search firms. And honestly, I don't even really know what search firms do other than vetting out and doing background checks and things like that. And it's like now you have tons of staff members that could probably do the exact same thing that a lot of these search firms do. And there's another thing is they put together search committees. We've had Auburn search committees with like these. You go get Bo Jackson and you go get Quentin Riggins and you go get all these Auburn people, and it's going to be a search committee. John Cohen says, and this should be like a T-shirt or something, or like a catchphrase. He says, "I am the committee." In other words, I'm calling the shots here. I'm the captain now. That's what I was thinking. I can't remember the name of that Tom Hanks where he gets it's like a group of pirates takes over his ship and the guy says, "I'm the captain now." That's the way it felt. John Cohen says, "I'm the committee. It's going through me. I'm calling these shots." I dug that. That got me kind of jacked up. And that's what you need. You need a strong voice. I feel like Auburn athletic directors in the past, it sort of felt like they are I'm going to try to think of the best politically correct term here. Yes, men. How about that? We'll just say it has felt like Auburn athletic directors are just yes men over the past several years. Sure, there's been some good hires made by some of them. I thought Jay Jacobs obviously hired Bruce Pearl, hired Butch Thompson, made some pretty good hires. But for the most part, especially when it came to football, they're sort of just the messenger. Now, this could be a complete act. It doesn't feel like it is. It feels like John Cohen is serious. He's taking this thing and he's going to be calling the shots. He mentioned he had a discussion about the boosters. He kind of put that to bed and said, it feels like that's all made up because that's not been my experience. But another thing he said when he was talking about offense, he said, "I feel like he didn't pull any shots. Like he did definitely praised Hugh Freeze, but then he just threw the offense completely under the bus deservedly so. He said, I felt like if we just had average offense, I'm not standing up here right now. In other words, I had no choice. You keep looking at what happens, and he mentioned fourth quarters in particular. And we talked about that after the Oklahoma game, how not just the fourth quarter, but you look at those last drives. When you look at those last drives of the game and how many opportunities we had to go down the field to win, to tie, to take the lead, and we didn't come remotely close to converting any of those. I think against Oklahoma, it was not super late in the fourth quarter, but you were able to go down and take the lead once out of what was it? That graphic was at the time with the 2 overtimes against Missouri. I think it was 10 opportunities. And other than the one good drive, you essentially went backwards. I think it was like 35-ish plays for like 25 total yards, bunch of sacks. That is just, I mean, inexcusable is obviously the right word because it ended up in a firing, but it's really mind-blowing at how badly you can be organized to where you can't even come close to putting your offense in a chance to succeed in those situations. If you're just average, I mean, we're like dead last. If you're just middle of the road, you probably have, we've played what? We're 4-5. You've played 9 games. You might be 6-3 right now, or maybe even 7-2 with average offense. The Texas A&M game would have been a tough one. I mean, heck, there may be an argument you could be undefeated with an average offense. I mean, I'm sure we could ask AI, hey, put us at middle of the road offense and project out the last our last 9 games, and what would our record be? So yeah, good stuff there for him to call that out. I thought that was something, to say I'm probably not even standing here. In other words, look, I don't want to be here. It wasn't my plan to be here. I had no opportunity. I had no choice to be here. Really, really good stuff. And then the last thing discussed that it's not necessarily like a superlative, but it was something that was interesting that was asked. I mean, he was point blank asked if they would be paying Hugh Freeze the entire buyout or if there was going to be some sort of settlement. In other words, paying a reduced amount. You saw Brandon Marcello say that Auburn's paying the full buyout. You saw others saying that maybe there was a reduced amount agreed upon. And John Cohen just point blank said, no, it's not settled yet, and it may not be for a while, basically. That doesn't sound to me like Auburn is going to just right out the gate pay out the full buyout. And I don't know how you get around paying out a buyout unless there was something going on outside of football. Let's just say that they felt was justified. I have a lot of different opinions on that. Though that can typically get pretty ugly. I don't know that it necessarily super looks good in a coaching search, but at the same time, I think football people talk to football people, and football people look at this roster. Football people know the talent top to bottom, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. And football people undoubtedly know there was something else going on. I'm not here to speculate on what that was. I just think it's interesting. That seemed like something that you say, we're handling that internally, and that's not to be discussed. He had no problem. He had no problem saying we haven't paid the full buyout. And It doesn't seem like we want to right now. And it may take a while before this thing's settled. So that could be an interesting storyline to follow. So let me know what you guys think. I understand we're talking about a press conference, but it's a big day. It was a big day. It's a big change no matter which way you look at it. And I thought they did a really good job, particularly DJ Durkin, in pointing out that there's a lot of talent on this team. I feel like if we just change a few things, not necessarily change what we're doing, but how we're doing it, we can be a little bit more organized, go play aggressive, and maybe go win this game against Vanderbilt. So obviously gets me a little bit more excited for Saturday. So guys, I really appreciate you listening. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll talk again soon. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. Stay buttoned.
Thanks for listening, and drive home safely.